everyone, and welcome back to another episode. But this is a special breaking news episode of House to Home. This is the second one of these that we've done because we're so pumped. We just received some more amazing news from the US Supreme Court. So we're so excited to get into this. As always, I'm Grace Youngson with my colleague Joseph Kohm, who's our policy director, and this podcast is brought to you by Family Policy Alliance Foundation. Joseph, why don't you tell us what's going on?
Oh, I'd love to, Grace. It's great to be on the show with you, joining you once again from England. This time I'm in Oxford, so we have changed countries again, but this is a great reason to do an emergency broadcast. So we're just really happy at FPA because for the second week in a row, we've gotten some really great news from the Supreme Court of the United States in the cases we were watching. As the audience remembers, last week we got a great victory in United States versus Scrimeti, which reaffirmed our Help Not Harm campaign. And today, just a few minutes ago, we received an excellent ruling in a case called Free Speech Coalition versus Paxton that reaffirmed our main effort of our Let Parents Parent campaign so far, which was to protect kids from online pornography exposure via mandatory age verification. So I'll start with background on this case, Grace, and then talk about how it applies to this campaign. So this case, as I said, is Free Speech Coalition versus Paxton. The parties are Attorney General Ken Paxton from Texas, because this suit was brought to challenge Texas's law protecting kids from exposure to online pornography through age verification requirements. It was one of 23 states that have passed that law so far. In the past 3 years, it started in Louisiana through State Representative Lori Schlegel and has been passed in 23 states so far, challenged in every state. Texas's laws and the case around it is the first to make it to the court. Free Speech Coalition, the opposing party, is it's a coalition of groups that puts itself out there as representatives of libertarian free speech values, but really they are a trade group representing the adult industry, specifically the pornography industry. So they challenged this law as a violation of supposed rights that adults have to access pornography, because it meant that for an adult to be able to watch pornography online, they would have to verify that they are of age. And we've talked at length on other FPA products about how that age verification software works. So I won't touch on that in depth today, just as much as the court did. But that was the challenge, is that unfortunately in Supreme Court jurisprudence, adults do, at this moment, of course, according to the law, have a First Amendment right to access pornography. So this law, because it requires everyone to age verify in order to protect kids, their position was this is a violation of adults' rights to access. And our position was no, because if you were to say in the old days, go buy pornography at a bookstore, like print pornography, well, even back then, you still had to show your ID like you would at, say, a liquor store, or if you were buying tobacco, to show that you were of age. That has always been constitutional. There is Supreme Court precedent to support that. So our contention was digital age verification is the same thing as in-person age verification. And in fact, it's even less onerous, because if you were to do it in person, you have to age verify every time you buy something. If you do it online, you only have to do it once forever, at least for that domain name. So that was our side's position, and the position of Attorney General Ken Paxton going into this case. And the legal question was one of scrutiny levels, which is a jurisprudential term, meaning how strictly does the court scrutinize the law in question to make sure it reaches a compelling state interest. And the Fifth Circuit, the ruling circuit in this case the Fifth Circuit covers Texas, had ruled a lower level of scrutiny than the maximum available. And the challenge from Free Speech Coalition, strictly legally speaking, was it should have been reviewed under a higher level of scrutiny. The Supreme Court agreed with the Fifth Circuit today, which was a huge win, because it means Texas's law remains in effect. All the 22 other state laws remain in effect, and it means both age verification technology and the compelling interest that states have to protect kids from what they call obscenity is constitutional, and states can do this. So it's almost a total vindication for our campaign so far, and for that we do want to thank Attorney General Ken Paxton and his team for so brilliantly and tirelessly defending this law, among many others. We also want to thank specifically Texas Values, which is our state FPC in Texas, for supporting this law, and the Attorney General's team. And then all the state FPCs that got this wave of legislation passed to protect kids, 23 states now remain in place, and it gives us a springboard to do so much more. So I think that's I think I've tried to cover all the big points of this case, Grace. One final takeaway I would say, excuse me, is that we got a clean agreement from all 9 justices that pornography is bad for kids, that is harmful to them. So even though this ruling was by a 6-3 majority, meaning 3 justices did disagree with the majority opinion and would have ruled differently, though even those 3 justices who disagreed did make very clear that they agree with our movement's central premise that pornography is bad for kids, and states have a duty to try to protect them from it and empower parents to protect them from it. So just for example, these are the first 2 sentences from the dissenting opinion written by Justice Elena Kagan. She wrote, "No one doubts that the distribution of sexually explicit material to children of the sort involved here can cause great harm." So our messaging is getting through there. Then she went on to write and say, or to say the same thing in legal terms, no one doubts that states have a compelling interest in shielding children from speech of that kind. That is how she begins her dissenting opinion, and that is dramatic because it means it's a further cementing of what we have been trying to say, which is that everyone agrees with us. We now all know that pornography is bad for kids. There's a mountain of research and scientific evidence showing this. We as Christians know that innately because of how highly we view sex and God's design for it within marriage. But to see even those disagreeing on the court today, at least in its ruling, agreeing with us on this core premise is a dramatic ethical and messaging victory for the pro-family movement. So I wanted to make sure I covered that, and that's what we're hoping to really carry forward as we've established that law. Pornography is harmful for kids, and that's a dramatic win for FPA, for the FPCs, and for the pro-family movement and our coalition allies.
Yeah, I totally agree, Joseph. And I think it's so great that you brought out that key messaging aspect. And just to break this down for our audience, not all of us are intelligent lawyers like you, Joseph. And so, what this ruling really means is that now it is legal for states to enact these laws to require age verification. So, as you said, I think 22 states already have this. And so now they're fully legal in having those, and now we want that in the rest of the states too. But that's basically what this ruling means. It's not necessarily a federal order that this is happening everywhere. There's work
Mm-hmm.
to be done, but it makes it legitimate states passing that. And so I think, and it's amazing, the fact that basically everyone agrees with us on our premise that porn is bad for kids. And really, it doesn't get more complicated than that. If porn is bad for kids, then we should be taking steps to stop them accessing it. And the argument that this is going to affect adults really, to me, makes zero sense because we're not restricting adults. We're literally just restricting kids. And
Mm-hmm.
most adults do not want kids seeing this. I also find it really crazy that the opposing side was called Free Speech Coalition, because if people look this case up, it's very deceptive. Like, they're not for free speech, these are just the porn companies giving themselves a cute little branding to make it less, you know, uh, bad. But yeah, it's really crazy. So it's so great that we're seeing this great ruling, and I think it's encouraging for all of us in the pro-family movement that things are really shifting in the right direction.
Yeah, it's so encouraging, Grace. Our audience should be really encouraged on a cultural level here, in an age when the political environment is so divided, to learn that some things are still truly bipartisan, are still 90+% in agreement with across political divides is really encouraging, especially when those are things that people really ought to agree with. People should want to protect kids from pornography, and it should encourage our audience that people still do. And FPA has done a lot to bring us back to that point publicly and now at law. So I appreciate how you pointed that out, Grace. And it reminds me of last year. I mean, like you said, Free Speech Coalition is a deceptive name because they do represent the adult industry. And the lead attorney for them who argued this case I have argued in opposition to in legislative halls for some of these bills. And the last time I did that, we were fortunate enough to get the bill voted forward in a very, I would say, liberal jurisdiction, liberal state. And that was the first piece of encouragement I had to see that even in a state that was generally opposed to pro-family values, they all still voted unanimously for this bill. And I think that's because many of them are parents, and as soon as I provide them with the research that says the average age of first exposure to pornography is between 7 and 13 years old. That exposure usually happens when kids aren't looking for it, and it happens without parental knowledge or consent. The terror sets in to a parent to think about their precious child that they've been entrusted with stumbling on pornography and eventually becoming addicted to it without them having any say in the matter or even any knowledge of it. And I think for even stripping it back further, the idea of our kids finding out about sex in a way that we did not approve of as parents, that is terrifying for parents, and it's created this bipartisanness that now we have fully established at the court. So that is a big win, and I appreciate you just clarifying what that means legally for these laws. Is that doesn't mean every state has to do this, doesn't mean the federal government's going to do it. It means that the 23 states that have done it get to keep doing it. And it means that people like us and our FPC network and our coalition allies nationally get to keep arguing for more of these bills, because we do want to see that next. We want to see the rest of the 27 states pass these laws, and we want to see the federal government pass an age verification law for pornography.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I agree. So what's you talked about this a little bit. You know, we want to see all states and the federal government pass these types of laws. What about social outcomes
Mm-hmm.
and how that will improve? How do you see that going, Joseph?
Yeah, great question, Grace. This is FPA's wheelhouse, I think, because our way into this issue was one of parental rights. We believe it's a parent's right to direct the upbringing of their children, and a crucial part of that is when and how they learn about sex and intimacy. And if the stats I just read to you are true that we've been arguing for, that right is currently being denied parents. Kids are learning about sex from pornography, not from parents, not from sex ed classes, definitely not from the church. And so what these laws do is they protect kids from that first exposure that sets them down the path to believing that what the sex they see in pornographic videos is what real sex is like in a committed relationship. The research shows they do believe that when they watch porn. But the reality is that's not true. The sex portrayed in pornography is incredibly violent, abusive, degrading. The research shows that almost all pornography videos have some form of abuse, whether verbal or physical, and that kids are believing this and then they're acting it out in their own sex lives. We have a great expert witness who's worked with us at FPA in the state halls for these bills named Heidi Olson, who's a pediatric nurse examiner, and she testifies to this trend where she's seeing more sexual abuse cases for minors where the only risk factor was the offender's exposure to pornography. They didn't have any sex abuse in their family. Their parents weren't abusers. They weren't abused. Their only risk factor was they watch pornography regularly. And they are seeing this abuse in pornography, and because they think that's what real sex is, they're role playing it out in their own sex lives. So, looking forward to answer your question, Grace, what FPA wants to see is a nation where families thrive, God is honored, life is cherished, and religious freedom flourishes. We believe part of that is we want to see marriage increase. We want to see people have healthy sex lives within those marriages. By cutting off the pornography industry's influence on our kids, it decreases the likelihood that kids will get their sex education from pornography, and it increases the likelihood that they will get true, accurate, hopefully biblically based sex education from a parent and from anyone the parent explicitly authorizes, like a school or a church. And that will lead to healthier sex lives, more marriages, better sex within those marriages. It will lead to less unplanned pregnancies because it will lead to better sex practices and safer sex practices. And it will lead to better satisfaction and less addiction rates. And overall, I think it will lead to a more cohesive society, because pornography's essence is that it devalues people, and it causes you to devalue the other person and vice versa, and eventually it causes you to devalue yourself. And we live in a society that is so porn saturated. There's so many pornography addicts walking among us. including I used to be one. Many years ago, I was a porn addict. I was addicted to pornography, and God set me free through a great therapist and through the Christians around me, my church, my small group. I've been free and sober for many years. But that's the society that we live in, is more people like me back then than like me now. And I think when we see the influence of the pornography industry cut off from our kids during their formative years, we will see a society that truly cares about each other much more than we do now. That is the vision that we at FPA want to see come upon this nation, and we are not going to stop until we get there. So that's why the last thing I'll say, Grayson, just to preview what's next for people, is we want to pass one of these laws in every state in the nation. We also want every state to take this ruling and pursue passing what we call an App Store Accountability Act. This is a law, a model law written by our friends at the Digital Childhood Alliance, which FPA is proud to endorse and be partners with. And it's more holistic internet protections outside of pornography for kids. So I won't go into too much depth about the law, but the bottom line is it protects kids from being preyed upon by apps and social media. It involves parents at that level. And it makes sure that parents can have faith in the app stores by making sure apps have accurate age ratings. Right now, app developers self-rate their apps, so they have an interest to rate them as low as possible to attract as many kids, even if the app contains explicit sexuality or graphic violence, etc. So the App Store Accountability Act provides holistic protections online for parents and kids. Every state should pass one, including the federal government, and that's what FPA is going to work for, because we want to achieve that vision of more marriages, more kids within marriages, better sex lives within those marriages, and a society that loves each other a lot more than it does right now.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I'm so passionate about that subject too, because I really think that like porn kills love and kills family. And really, family is the only picture that we really have in society of God's love in a very physical demonstration of that, because it's really that only place where true sacrifice exists for another person. There's forgiveness. Like within family, you forgive things that you probably would not forgive a friend over, in some ways. And I think that what is so exciting, I love how you painted this much broader picture, that this isn't just about a law, this is about people's mindsets, people's attitudes towards family, towards love, and then their subsequent actions. This is about the legacy of future generations, kids growing up and what they're learning. Where will whatever age you are listening to this podcast, we're all wanting to leave a godly legacy to the generations that follow us. And this is exactly a part of that. I think exactly as you said, Joseph, porn is very much about, a lot of it is violence based, but it's also very, very much like self gratification, very selfish, very self focused. And God's idea of family is completely opposite to that. But when we start training a culture and a society in this selfish mindset, there's no wonder that we have abortion and things like that that exist. And so as we start bringing back this return to God's way of seeing things and God's kind of love, then we're going to see such a huge shift in culture around all of these issues. And so this really is much more far reaching than just this one ruling.
Yeah, well said, Grace. I do want to take just a second to thank the people that brought this about. I mean, FPA played a role, but this was a coalition effort. I've mentioned our Family Policy Council network of allies, our state family policy councils. This was made possible by them. They've been working at passing these 23 laws up till now, and they're going to keep working to pass more in the states that don't have them. So folks can connect with their state family policy council at familypolicyalliance.com/allies. I recommend that you do if you haven't already. We also had a great national coalition of allies that helped us get into this. Specifically, the Institute for Family Studies is who encouraged us at FPA to really get involved in this area at a policy level, which we were delighted to do. But also our friends at places like Exodus Cry, the Heritage Foundation, and so many others that I could continue to name. We're just so thankful for them for their partnership, and it's going to continue as we keep working to pass these laws. So I want to thank them. And I just want to leave our audience as well, Grace, just with a mention of another really important parental rights case that came out today. We don't want to breeze over this. The show is about Free Speech Coalition versus Paxton, and it should be because it's so critical to FPA and to families. But there was another great families case today, too, which was called Mahmoud v. Taylor, which was about parents who were not allowed to opt their children, their elementary school age children, out of LGBTQ plus lessons in elementary school. We did a whole episode on this show, and I would encourage our audience to go review that if they want to hear about it. But that case was handed down today and was a ringing endorsement of parental rights and the necessity of opt-outs so that parents and can exercise their religious freedom rights to make sure their kids are not exposed to lessons like LGBT lessons that contradict the Christian perspective on sex and marriage and identity. So that was a dramatic and really powerful vindication for parental rights. You combine that with Free Speech Coalition versus Paxton, which restored a parent's right to protect their kids from online pornography. And this was a massive, massive win for parents and their rights to direct their kids' upbringing today from the court. And we're just really thankful to that. And we're thankful to God because all victories belong to Him. All intellect comes from Him. We've been praying for these justices that they would make these right decisions, and He has answered our prayers. So, and finally, thank you to our supporters who made all these efforts possible. I painted that picture of the America we want to see someday earlier. It is because of you and your listeners, our supporters at FPA, that are going to carry us forward to that place. So thank you for your partnership and support with us. And just know this is not the end. It's the end of the beginning, because we're not going to stop until we get there. And this case is the first big victory that will catapult us forward. So thank you to our listeners and supporters.
Amen. I agree. Thank you to everyone who supports us and everyone listening. We hope that this has been super encouraging to hear what is going on. I think that in some ways there are a lot of bad things going on. We live in a crazy world, but God is good and good will win. And I think it's so good that we highlight these victories and encourage ourselves in the Lord and take the time to celebrate and enjoy the victory and then be re-energized to keep fighting the good fight. So yeah, thank you, Joseph. This has been an amazing podcast.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better, Grace. And thanks to our audience for listening. So this has been another happy emergency episode of House to Home. So thank you for listening. I've been Joseph Kohm alongside Grace Youngson. As always, if you like our content, please be sure to follow us. Click that like and subscribe button on your podcast app. And if you like this kind of content, you can find a lot more of it at Family Policy Alliance's social media pages, our handle is @family_policy. So go find us there. Otherwise, we thank you for listening, and we will be back again next week with another episode of House to Home.